In the summer of 1974, a young woman walked away from a campsite on the Norfolk coast and was never seen again. This is the true crime story of Pamela Exall. On a late August night in 1974, 21-year-old Pamela Exall disappeared from a campsite on the Norfolk coast. She had been staying at the Digleas Campsite near Snettisham, a quiet seaside village where the landscape opens towards the Wash, an enormous stretch of tidal water, mudflats and sand. Pamela left the campsite that night and she never returned. No confirmed sighting would provide a clear explanation of where she went next. No discovery would resolve what happened to her. More than half a century later, her disappearance remains a mystery built around a deceptively simple question. How could a young woman leave a holiday campsite and vanish without leaving investigators an answer? Even the date attached to Pamela's disappearance requires care. Accounts of the case have given conflicting information, with the 27th and the 30th of August both appearing in descriptions of what happened. The reported time also varies, generally placing her departure at roughly 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. Those discrepancies may sound minor, but in a missing person investigation, a difference of several days or even half an hour can alter the reconstruction of events. Rather than pretending that one disputed version can be treated as certain, what remains consistent is that Pamela disappeared during the final days of August at night while staying near Snettisham. Pamela was not simply passing through Norfolk alone. She was staying at the campsite with people close to her, and accounts of the case refer to her brother among those connected with the trip. The setting offered little reason to expect that the holiday would become the beginning of a decades-long investigation. Snettisham sits on the western side of Norfolk, facing the Wash rather than the open North Sea. By day, the coast can appear broad and peaceful. After dark, it becomes a very different environment. Long stretches of shoreline are exposed to changing tides, channels cut through the flats, and familiar landmarks become harder to distinguish. At some point late that evening, Pamela left the campsite. What she intended to do afterwards has never been established with certainty. That gap is where the mystery truly begins. There is no verified sequence of movements showing her traveling from one location to another, no documented chain of encounters explaining who she may have met, and no reliable evidence allowing investigators to reconstruct her final hours. She was there, and then she was gone. When Pamela failed to return, concern turned into a search. The surrounding area presented investigators with an immediate problem. A disappearance close to the Wash could not be approached in the same way as one occurring in an ordinary residential neighborhood. The terrain itself had to be examined as a possible explanation. Search efforts reported in connection with the case involved police officers and specialist resources, with dogs, divers, and aerial assistance among the methods associated with attempts to locate her. A Royal Air Force helicopter has also been reported as taking part in the operation. The scale of those efforts shows how seriously the possibility of an accident was considered. The shoreline offered one obvious theory. Pamela could have walked towards the coast, encountered difficult ground, or been caught by the tide. The Wash has extensive tidal flats, and water can move across parts of that landscape rapidly. Someone unfamiliar with the area might misjudge distance, direction, or the time available before conditions changed. Darkness would only make navigation more difficult. If Pamela had entered that environment alone late at night, an accident was physically possible, but possibility is not proof. Despite searches of the area, Pamela's body was not recovered. Investigators did not obtain physical evidence demonstrating that she entered the water, became trapped by the tide, or drowned. That absence prevented the accident theory from becoming a confirmed explanation. The sea can conceal evidence, and tidal environments can carry objects considerable distances, so the failure to find a body does not automatically rule drowning out. At the same time, accepting drowning simply because the campsite stood near dangerous water would replace evidence with assumption. Another possibility takes the investigation away from the shoreline entirely. Pamela may have encountered another person after leaving the campsite. If so, virtually every meaningful question remains unanswered. There is no confirmed offender, no established vehicle linked to her disappearance, and no publicly proven account of an assault. Without evidence placing a particular person with Pamela after she left, a criminal explanation remains a theory rather than a solved sequence of events. That uncertainty creates one of the most disturbing features of the case. Many disappearances eventually produce something investigators can anchor the investigation to: a witness who remembers a conversation, clothing found away from the expected route, a vehicle seen at an unusual time, human remains, or a confession years later. Pamela's case has never produced the breakthrough needed to transform speculation into a final account. Whatever happened occurred within a space that investigators were unable to bridge. Voluntary disappearance has also formed part of the wider range of possibilities considered when someone vanishes without a recovered body. In Pamela's case, there is no confirmed evidence demonstrating that she deliberately abandoned her previous life. For that explanation to become persuasive, investigators would normally hope to identify preparation, money put aside, travel arrangements, correspondence, a new identity, or a later verified sighting. None of those elements has provided a publicly established resolution to Pamela's case. A person can leave unexpectedly, but the mere absence of a body does not demonstrate that they chose to disappear. The conflicting details that have survived across different accounts make reconstruction harder. If Pamela disappeared on the 27th of August, that was a Tuesday. If the 30th is correct, it was a Friday. Those are not interchangeable details. The population of a campsite, nearby traffic, evening activity, and the people likely to be present could vary significantly between a weekday and the beginning of a weekend. The difference illustrates why historical missing person cases can become increasingly difficult to reassess. Once inconsistent information enters the public record, later retellings may repeat it until uncertainty begins to look like fact. The same problem applies to the precise time. A departure at 10:30 and one at 11 may appear close together, but a 30-minute difference matters when assessing tides, potential witnesses, and movements around the campsite. Memories recorded after an alarming event can also be imperfect. People estimate times, confuse what happened before or after another activity, and later remember conversations differently. None of that means witnesses were deceptive. It means investigators working with human memory had to build a timeline from information that may never have been precise enough to answer every question. What can be separated from that uncertainty is the extraordinary effort required to search terrain around the wash. Divers could examine water, dogs could search accessible ground, officers could cover routes from the campsite, and aircraft could survey areas impossible to inspect efficiently on foot. Yet each method had limitations. Tides alter the landscape, water reduces visibility, mud and channels restrict movement. Dog searches depend upon conditions and usable scent. An aerial search can cover a vast area, but cannot reveal everything concealed beneath vegetation, mud, or water. The lack of a discovery therefore leads to two very different interpretations. One is that Pamela entered an environment capable of concealing what happened to her. The other is that searchers were concentrating on the landscape, while the true explanation lay somewhere else. Perhaps she left the immediate area. Perhaps another person became involved. Neither proposition answers the case because no surviving evidence establishes which direction the investigation should ultimately take. For Pamela's family, that absence of certainty would have meant something far more personal than an unresolved police file. When a body is never recovered and no reliable account explains a disappearance, relatives are denied the usual boundary between searching and grieving. Every unconfirmed report can create another question. Every unsuccessful search can remove one possibility without providing another. Time passes, witnesses grow older, memories fade, and locations change, while the central uncertainty remains exactly where it began. The campsite and surrounding coast could never speak for what happened there. If Pamela walked towards the water, no surviving evidence has established her route. If she went elsewhere, no confirmed trail has shown where. If she met somebody, that person's identity has never been proven publicly. Investigators were therefore left with competing explanations that could each account for parts of the mystery, but not the whole of it. Cases from the 1970s also existed in a very different investigative world. There were no mobile telephone records tracing movements between masts, no network of private doorbell cameras, no routine digital payments creating an immediate trail, and far less public CCTV coverage. Modern investigators can sometimes reconstruct a person's movements minute by minute from electronic information created without the person even realizing it. Pamela disappeared before those records existed. Detectives depended much more heavily on witnesses, physical searches, local inquiries, and evidence discovered at the scene. That makes the opening hours after a disappearance particularly significant. Once searches failed to locate Pamela, there was no digital archive waiting to be examined decades later. Any unknown witness who passed through Snettisham during those late August days may have carried information that was never recognized as relevant. Someone might have seen a young woman walking along a road without realizing she would soon be reported missing. A driver may have noticed another vehicle and forgotten it within days. Those are possibilities rather than known events, but they demonstrate why solving an old disappearance becomes progressively harder when the original investigation fails to establish a final route. There is also a danger in allowing the most dramatic explanation to dominate simply because a case remains unsolved. Murder attracts attention because it supplies a villain and an apparent reason for the absence of a body. An accident can appear equally compelling because of the geography surrounding Snettisham. Voluntary disappearance offers a third narrative. None deserves to be presented as the answer without evidence. Pamela's case survives precisely because investigators never obtained enough proof to close the gap between those competing possibilities. What happened after she stepped away from the campsite may have taken only minutes to unfold. The consequences have lasted for decades. Somewhere between Pamela's departure and the moment people realized she had not returned, the trail was lost. Searches involving considerable manpower and specialist resources could not recover it. Years of distance have not produced the discovery capable of settling the question. Pamela Exall was 21 years old when she disappeared during that summer of 1974. She had arrived in Norfolk as a young woman on a trip, not as the subject of a mystery that would still be discussed generations later. The surviving record contains uncertainty about the exact date and time, but the central fact remains stark. Pamela left the Digleas Campsite near Snettisham and was never conclusively traced afterwards. Perhaps the answer lies in the dangerous landscape beside the wash. Perhaps it lies with a person whose connection to Pamela was never uncovered. Or perhaps something happened that investigators at the time had no reason to anticipate. Every theory eventually reaches the same boundary because evidence does not carry it any further. More than 50 years after Pamela vanished, there has been no publicly established discovery explaining her final movements, no recovered body providing a cause of death, and no proven offender who can account for her disappearance. What remains is the image of a young woman leaving a Norfolk campsite late at night, and a search that could never find where her journey ended. Until evidence emerges that can bridge that missing part of the story, Pamela Exall's disappearance remains exactly that, unresolved.